Hi, I'm Renee Gagny. I'm the Shellfish Constable for the town of Chatham, and we're here at the town's upwelling facility. It's located under the Harbor Master's office, and we're here with Ben Sacco. He's the propagation specialist, and he's going to give you a tour of the upweller. It's where all the magic happens. It's where we grow our shellfish, our quahogs, and our oysters, and I hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so we're out here outside the facility now. We're on the main dock here in Stage Harbor outside the Harbor Master's office. And this is where our pumps are. So underneath these three hatches hangs our submersible pumps. We have to come and install them every spring and take them out every fall. They go in for an annual service. There's a ton of electrolysis in the harbor, so they get some damage just from running all summer long. We put on six big zinc anodes to try and minimize that, and they get a service annually to minimize any kind of failure we might have. We want to make sure that we're always getting water for these animals. We want to have as few variables as possible. So these are the hatches that house our pumps. They actually hang off of that big metal pipe that goes across. And you can see all the wiring that's involved down here. We have to string this wiring by hand through the dock every spring and then out back again in the fall to take it out. And we have big green flexible, non-flexible piping that we have to string underneath the float and up onto the bulkhead so the water can actually make its way into the building. Okay, so this is the top of the system. This is where the water comes in. So we pump it in from Stage Harbor and it comes out of these pipes. So I have valves down here on the floor that I can adjust the flow with. I'm going to turn one on to show you guys what it kind of looks like.
So what happens, and you're going to smell this, we usually run two pumps at one time and we let one foul out so that all of the biofouling that's in that you know, it could be from mussels to barnacles or whatnot, they die because there's no oxygen. They suck out all the oxygen, they die, and then we flush it all out. Again, that's so there's no competition for the food, and also so that we get the same type of water flow coming in here, because once you get growth in those pipes, you're going to restrict the water that comes in here. So that's why we switch the pipes so that we can kill all the biofouling in the pipes.
During the height of the season, when all these tanks are full, we need to run at least 2 pumps at a time, and we save one as a backup so that we can, like Renee was saying, we can switch over which pumps are on. That way the lines that bring the water in can be cleaned out of anything that's fouling those up. Just like we clean the tanks and the silos, we like to keep our lines clean too. That way there's nothing in there eating food out of the lines that would prevent our quahogs from getting the most food they possibly can. In here is where the on and off, the breaker panel is, and these are for each individual pump. They are 3-phase pumps. They draw a lot of power, so there's a lot of wiring that goes into it, far above my pay grade. And all I know is that if we have a blip, any kind of blip, power outage whatsoever, I have to come in here, or Renee has to come in here, and we have to reset these pumps using these buttons. We have no alarm system other than a surveillance camera that we have to check, and we just have to be like, oh, maybe there could be a power outage. Let me check the camera, and it points at these lights here so we can tell if the pumps are on or not. But once the power comes back on, the pumps do not come back on. We have to manually come in here and push these buttons to have the pumps turn back on. If there's an extended outage, we have issues, but even if there's just a blip for 2 seconds, these turn off. If it's at midnight and we're asleep, we don't know about it until the next morning. The clams have been out of the water for 8 hours at least, and we have to come back in here and turn these pumps on.
And depending on the size, it makes a difference, because if they're really small and we just get them, they're much more fragile and they're unable to be without water for as much time as a larger quahog. So when we first get those animals, you know, we're looking at this all night long to make sure that there are no blips. When they're really small, they're very fragile, and you know, they're our babies, so we take care of them.
If we do have extended power outages, we have a gas-powered water pump that we use in lieu of these electric pumps. So we have to set up the pump so that we can access all 3 tanks, and then what we'll do is we'll fill it up and we'll make it so that the tanks can't drain. So we'll give them fresh water and we'll leave them in there for 3 to 4 hours. And after that, we get worried about them using up all the oxygen in the tank. So then we have to drain it out, put the pipe back in and fill it back up. So if we have any extended outage, we have to be here every 3 to 4 hours to come and drain the tanks and then refill them so we can make sure that these animals survive an outage.
And we just had that, actually, I think Ben was here for maybe 2 or 3 months when we had that kind of an episode. The transformer actually blew, and so we had the trash pump. We actually had to run out and get the trash pump because we couldn't get our own one started. So that was another time where we took turns and just made sure that there was water flowing through the animals. So, you know, it takes a lot of vigilance to make sure that they actually get to adulthood.
These are our Upweller tanks. So the big tank is called a raceway. It gets filled with water. And then these little cylinders you see inside, they're called silos. So the tank gets filled with water. It's called an upweller because the water comes up and through the silo and then into the discharge trough and out back into Stage Harbor. So these silos have a mesh screen with varying sizing depending on the size of the animals that are in there. So water can come up and through, but the clams stay on the mesh, and that's how they get all their food. The water comes up, we kind of force feed them in here. These tanks were put into this building in the 90s. They were built by the first person who held my position, so it's a homemade Chatham system. So right now in the Upweller we have last year's clams. So we haven't received our clams for 2024 yet. So these are all from 2023. The ones that don't grow very fast in the previous year, we overwinter in Oyster Pond, and then they'll come back in here in the spring so they can get a nice jump start before we get new animals in here. So right now we have quahogs in here, about 400,000. So this is the size they're at now. We get them, it looks like we get a bag of sand as we get them so small. So these are on their second year here in the Upweller. We don't want them to go to second year, but the ones that need a second year, we're happy to bring back in here in the spring. They grow really fast. So these are the quahogs we have in the building now. You can see all this really nice bright white on the edges of them. That is all brand new growth that's happened since I put them back in here. They've been in here for maybe a month. So you can see how fast they're growing. They've almost doubled in size, some of them. And another little thing to note here is these ones with the nice cool red designs on them, the designs themselves are called notata, and it's a genetic feature that some clams have. It's a pretty rare trait, but the hatcheries select for it. So if you see a lot of notata, you can kind of tell that it's a hatchery clam. Not all of them get that, but it's just a little neat thing that the hatcheries do. As you can see now, that a lot of these tanks are empty. I just have 2 out of 6 with silos inside of them. There are 400,000 here from last year, but we purchase about 2.5 to 3 million quahogs every year, and anywhere from 200 to 350,000 oysters. So right now we're at very low capacity because we haven't got our new animals in here yet. But once we get we get 2.5 million all at once. If they start growing really, really fast, this building fills up so fast that I'm going to have to boot these ones out and put them somewhere in the field under a net to make room so that those new ones can grow and have space. Because the thinner we keep them, the faster they grow. So you can see what it looks like inside a silo. So I would estimate that each one of these right now probably has anywhere from 15 to 30,000 in it. And these are all a really good size, but since I have the space, I hold on to them, and I'm going to try and get them as big as I can until I get those new ones in here, because they'll have a better chance out there under a net, or if we just free plant them if they're big. Every day or every other day, we come in here and we have to keep these babies clean. They're in here at a higher density than you'd find out in the wild or even under a net because of the amount of water that we can pump through here. We pump through about 800 gallons of water a minute, and that's just fully nutrient rich and has a lot of food for them to eat. So they're eating really fast, so they're also producing waste really fast. So we have to come in here and clean them off every other day at a minimum, daily if they really need it. But we come in here and we hose them off and we scrub the silos. We have to make sure that screen on the bottom doesn't have any biofouling with algae. We scrape the barnacles off the tank. Anything in here that's not a quahog or an oyster, I don't want in here. So if there's barnacles, that means they're stealing food from the quahogs. If there's algae growth in here, that means we're not getting all the nutrients that we want to the quahogs. So we come in here, we clean them off to make sure they're healthy, and we clean the tanks and the silos that they're in to make sure that there's no competition for them and they're getting all the food that they possibly can. So in here right now, they're about a year old. It'll take them anywhere from 3 to 5 years to be the size of a little neck, legal size to harvest. So they'll be in here for, we hope, 1 season. These ones are on their 2nd. And then they'll go either free planted out somewhere in Stage Harbor, or they'll go underneath a net where they'll live for a year, and they'll be maybe the size of a $50 then, or a quarter, and then it'll take them another year after that to grow to full size. So the fastest time you could think from when we get them, when they look like a grain of sand, to when you can eat them is about 3 years. So if you can see, the top tanks and the bottom tanks are both fed by the same water source. So water comes in at the very top of that top tank. It goes up through all the silos into the center trough at the top and down these spouts here. So we'll come through this tank into the middle, out through these, and then into this tank. So all the water that is in this tank has already gone through that tank, and that means anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million animals have eaten out of that water. So this tank gets less food than the top tank. Back when these were built, there was so much food in the water that it wasn't really an issue, but now that the environment is changing and everything, there's less food in the water for these animals. So right now in the spring, there's tons of food. These are growing great in the bottom tank, but as it gets warmer, you get less algae in the water, less food, and you can see a difference with the amount of waste that they're producing. The top tanks produce a lot more waste and they get bigger faster than these bottom tanks. And sometimes there's times you come in here and these bottom tanks don't have any waste on them at all, and the co-ops are just kind of hanging out. They're surviving because they're in the water, but they're not thriving and getting the nutrients that they would get if they were in one of those top tanks. Ideally, each tank would have its own water source. So each tank would have its own pump or its own piping so that the water wasn't used, we'll say, when it gets to all the animals. We want them all to have fresh water. And these ones in the bottom tank, that, like I said before, their water it's already been eaten out of. So they get the leftovers from the top tank. We want each tank to have its own source of water, because if things keep trending the way that they are, there'll be even less food in the ecosystem for them. And we're trying to grow a lot of animals in a really small space, so we need all the food that we can get. These 2 tanks we have on this side of the building, we had number them, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So tanks 3 and 4 here, they are our problem children. They have a bunch of issues that we've been trying to fix constantly. So this past winter, we attempted to jack up the tanks. So since this building is so old and these tanks were retrofitted in here, the floor, I mean, it gets wet all the time. The building is shifting and it's sinking. So the bottom of this tank was at a really steep angle. So all the water was rushing out of it without coming up through the silos. So what we tried to do this winter is we brought in some jacks and we jacked up one end. We had to loosen all the plumbing so that we could reattach it after it was in the position we wanted. We put wood blocks underneath to prop it up at the level we wanted, and we had to do the exact opposite for the top tank. We had to lower it down, and that way they're more of a level plane. And we're hoping that we'll get better flow out of these silos because of the angle and the speed at which the water was leaving. That we weren't getting enough water flow up and through these silos. So we're hoping that these adjustments can help it a little bit. But it's to be determined. You can see that we're filling up this space as much as we can. There's no room in here to add more tanks, to make the tanks bigger, to add more silos. So we're at capacity in this building, and we do what we can, which is about 2.5 to 3 million cohogs. But there's no more room for growth. That's what we're at, and we can't realistically take in more.
So we really want to encourage the public to come and take a look at this facility. If you're down in this neighborhood, come on in, and if folks are working, we'd love to talk. We love talking about shellfish at any time. So if you can come in and take a peruse through the Upweller, you'll get to see all of our animals, and hopefully the new ones will be here also. This is a very great, unique program to Chatham. It's been around for a long time, and without it, Stage Harbor wouldn't be the Stage Harbor that we know it, which is abundant for both commercial and recreational harvesters. So we're pretty proud of this program, and we like to share it with people. So come on by.
If you see all these doors open and I'm in here, come on in. I'll give you the whole talk I just gave right now.